more anti-conservative bias, this time from a leading tech giant, and Hollywood and the mainstream media push a glaring double standard. Another smear, a vile, vile smear against conservatives, against Republicans by Google. But this time, it was noticed and called out by Representative Kevin McCarthy, the Republican majority leader in the House. In a tweet, McCarthy said, "Dear Google, this is a disgrace." He then used an emoji of an arrow pointing down at a graphic with the hashtag #StopTheBias. And what Google did, as you can see, is in describing the California Republican Party, it gave a brief description from Wikipedia. And when it got to the section that notes the ideology, some of the ideology was conservatism, market liberalism, fiscal conservatism, green conservatism. But the first one was Nazism. Yes, Nazism. So in Google's search results, Nazism is returning the Republican Party. Now, this is the California GOP, but I'm sure it's returning other state GOPs. And I'm guessing that somewhere in the algorithm, it's returning the Republican National Committee and Republicans on the whole, conservatives on the whole. See, the left, they've always gone on social media and called us Nazis. You're Nazis. You're Nazis. Well, now their allies in big tech seem to be embedding that into their platform. Now, luckily, it was Kevin McCarthy's tweet. He's the House Majority Leader. He's got wide reach. And he received about 3,600 retweets, about 6,600 likes. So his engagement, people saw this tweet. The tweet got play. It's on a Drudge Report picked it up. The San Jose Mercury News did a story on it. And Google is walking it back. They're denying it. Google is saying, quote, "We regret that vandalism on Wikipedia briefly appeared on our search results. This was not the result of a manual change by Google. We have systems in place that catch vandalism before it impacts search results, but occasionally errors get through." Now, Google, according to San Jose Mercury News, but something we all know, and let me read from the story. It says, Google is often accused by conservatives of censoring right-wing expression. Now, there was a firing of, you remember this last year, Google engineer James Damore, it was actually earlier this year, over a memo arguing that women may be biologically less suited for tech jobs. Now, that fueled right-wing anger against the company because Google internally was allowing this. Google internally allows bias against conservatives, but then they fire somebody for expressing an opinion based on biology and physiology. Look, no matter how misguided it may be, I don't know if it's right, I don't know if it's wrong. I'm not a physiologist, I'm not a biologist. I'm not a psychologist. But I know that if somebody inside, I feel that if somebody inside Google had written a memo, white men are not suited for higher level jobs, Google would have celebrated them. They probably would have given them a grant and told them to go study it further, even though Google was founded by two white men. So Donald Trump Jr. chimed in, said they won't do a damn thing about it. More bias against conservatives. It's true. And you know why it's true? Now, look, I love to dig in. I love facts. I don't like to go off half-cocked and say, bias, 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 when there's an honest explanation for it. Yesterday, I brought you the story of how Julie Davis of the New York Times was depressed about being called fake news at a Trump rally in Nashville, Tennessee by a little boy, and then she was forced to correct her own fake news after underreporting the crowd at the rally by 80, excuse me, terrible allergies, by 80%. Right? But here's how you know that these aren't mistakes. Here's why I don't believe Google. Now, look, Google might be telling the truth. My opinion, I don't believe them. I don't believe Julie Davis of the New York Times, and here's why. They never have to make corrections because they painted conservatives or Republicans in a good light. Google doesn't have to make corrections that it calls Democrats communists. They only have to make corrections when they call Republicans Nazis. The New York Times never had to correct a story underestimating the size of a crowd at a Hillary rally. Well, nobody showed at Hillary rally, so they would have to underestimate it and say one person was there. But they've never had to correct a story about a liberal. The New York Times has never had to correct a story about Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Maxine Waters or Keith Ellison or Tom Perez or Al Green. The list goes, Chuck Schumer, the list goes on and on, Adam Schiff, Ted Lieu, Danny Davis. They never seem to have to print retractions or corrections about Democrats. You don't find Democrats and liberals enraged at these mainstream media outlets for the way they report on Democrats and liberals. You don't find Democrats and liberals debunking their stories and calling them fake news. You don't find Democrats and liberals going after sites like Google and Facebook and Twitter for bias against Democrats and liberals. Do you know why? Because it doesn't happen. They don't need to go after them because it doesn't happen. These sites are institutionally left, as is Hollywood, as is the mainstream media now. This past week, we saw the uproar from Roseanne being canceled, right? I mean, it's the number one trending news story probably in the world. Viacom then canceled all the old Roseanne shows from 30 years ago. Now, Roseanne was immediately and summarily fired for one tweet. Keith Olbermann was hired back by ESPN, an ABC Disney subsidiary. ABC Disney, of course, fired Roseanne. Keith Olbermann was hired back despite a history of vile tweets calling the president a Nazi. You think that's coincidence? Google calls Republicans Nazis. Keith Olbermann calls Republicans Nazis. But it's just a coincidence, right? It's just a big coincidence. Big coincidence. It's just a mistake. It's Wikipedia vandalism. Who in the world would believe that? It's not that they do it. The liberals do it. It's that they insult your intelligence and tell you they're not doing it. This is really important content. It shows just how biased tech industry, the media world, is against conservatives. They're not even hiding it anymore. We need to expose this every day. Help me keep doing that by subscribing to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. Go to the App Store, download the Rebel app, and stick with the Rebel, our website, our social media feeds, these videos, to see what's going on with Tommy Robinson over in the UK. He was, of course, jailed for having the audacity to report on Muslim rape gangs. The UK doesn't want you to know about that. I'm sure that's happening in other nations in Europe as well. We can't let it happen. The world needs a free and fair press. People have a right to know what's going on, so follow us to stay up to date with that. As always, thank you so much for watching. You have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.